You're listening to Packers Talk Network. PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans that just love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into all the national sports media headlines and talking points and all that nonsense. We're sticking with real football, and we're sticking with the Packers. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Follow us on all the socials and subscribe to that Packers Talk YouTube channel. All those things make a huge difference for us. Very helpful. Don't take you very long. So thank you to all of our listeners and subscribers. And before we get started, a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at ticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packer game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Good evening, Tim. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Miles. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Did you get a chance to catch that Hafley press conference that we had earlier today?
I did, yeah. Hafley and Stanovich both came up to the podium, had some things to say, which was cool to see. Haven't seen those guys talk in a while, and impressed by Hafley again. You know, I hesitant to say it, but really encouraged about the new defensive coordinator. He's saying all the right things, and he brings the energy. The players are saying the right things about the system, so I'm optimistic. I guess I'm ready to get hurt again as far as the defense goes. But there's also I'll believe it when I see it kind of thing. But yeah, I thought Hafley was really good again today. And, he hit on some of the things that you want to hear. Specifically, he talked about how good Xavier McKinney has been in the meeting rooms. He just, really spoke very highly of McKinney, everything that he's able to do and that he'll be able to do in his defense, but then also the leadership that he's showing with he's got a very young room in that safety room now. So they love McKinney, and I think he's going to be a great fit for the defense. And Hafley, he's going to be able to play him in the post. He's going to be able to play him in the slot, down in the box. He'll be able to play him everywhere. But Hafley spoke very highly of him. And then I think the other nugget that I took out of his media availability was the defensive line is going to attack. He specifically said that they're not going to be a read and react defensive front. They are going to attack. Go get the football is what he said. And that is going to be a big welcome change from what we saw with Joe Barry and really what we saw at Pettin with Dom Capers. This isn't your 2 gapping or your 1.5 gapping system that they played. They're not holding guys up and reading and reacting. He wants them off the ball fast and in the backfield. And I think for someone like Devontae Wyatt, breakout could be coming, because that's his kind of system. He's that kind of player where he's a 3 technique, get off the ball, get in the backfield, and just screw things up for the offense real quick. So, yeah, some encouraging things from Hafley. He's really impressed me. I know it's very early and they haven't done anything yet, but just what he wants to do defensively, the attacking mentality is just it's really, music to our ears, I guess. It's something we haven't seen in Green Bay for a while, so it's very much welcome. I've been impressed by Hafley. And then just in Stanovich real quick, too, I like that he touched on Zach Tom. He said they really like him at right tackle. Doesn't mean he's going to stay there, but they really like him there. So I would like to see him stay there. Doesn't mean he's going to, but I think that's at least where they're going to start him for now. And, we'll see from here the best 5 is going to be in their eyes. And it sounds like they really want to get Marshawn Lloyd involved early. So maybe him and Dillon are kind of the interchangeable number 2 running backs. I think Jacobs is obviously going to see the field a lot, but it might not be, Jacobs comes out, Dillon comes in, and, we may only see a couple of snaps here and there for Lloyd. It may be situation specific, game plan specific, and we might see, just as much of Lloyd as we do with Dillon, if not more. So that's encouraging news as well, because I'd really like to get a look at the rookie. From what I've seen and what he was at USC, man, he's a lot of ability and a lot of talent there. And I really like the mix with him and Jacobs. So yeah, those were kind of the things that I took out of the two coordinators talking today. Not a whole lot of breaking news or huge news coming out of it, but just some little things to keep an eye on as we get further into OTAs and then mini camp here.
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed that press conference, and Hafley. One thing that stood out to me is how much he's energized by the guys. He seemed very, very excited about everybody's energy, their approach, the professionalism. I was just very excited about his perspective of these players, this team right now, and he was very complimentary of LaFleur and the culture that he's built there. That sounds probably like generic coach speak, but again, this comes back to things that he didn't have to say, right? And so he said it more than once how complimentary he was of LaFleur and the culture that he's built. And I don't think that was by accident. So I think that's something we should pay attention to, and something that's definitely worth kind of holding on to say, like, hey, apparently there's culture here, and that's a great thing. It's like a really solid foundation to be building on. And I think before, at least this time last year, it was we may be popping in and out with the stream. Stick with us if the stream's a little bit weak. But I think this time last year it was fair to question the culture. What did they have going on? What was it going to be like going into the season? There was a lot of veteran leadership leaving the building. And then that question got answered, right? And I think now it's really cool to hear that that's continuing on, that they're building on that culture. It's only getting stronger. So that was really my biggest takeaway. I mean, look, and this is kind of the theme of the night, right, for us, is like, let's not overreact too much at this point in the year. There's not a whole lot to take away from rookie mini camp or your coach's press conference in May. They're just satisfying media obligations, and that's why I think the most valuable things to listen to are the things they don't have to say, right? So that's what stood out to me. As far as Stenavich, it's really funny how Stanovich's, I don't know, his position or the way that he talked about Tom and the line was a little bit different from the way that Goot talked about it before the draft. So I think we're making a shift here from pre-draft smokescreen speak to they're in team building mode now. So everything they say now is almost cryptic to the team, right? It doesn't really matter to the rest of the league at this point until maybe you get down to training camp. Anything they're saying about who's going to play what where, the only people who are hearing that are the media, us, fans, and the players, and so I think at this point it's all wide open. It makes sense that Stenavich would say what he said because that's where things are at, right? There's no reason you haven't seen everybody on the field at once for anything to have changed. So I think it's kind of a safe statement on his part, but it leaves all the possibilities open for the competition that I think we know is coming. And the thing that he did say that was very consistent with what everybody else is saying is the best five. They're very, very focused in on this best five concept. And so I think when you look at it, just sort of step back, the best five got better after the draft. Now we get to see who the best five is and where they fit. And to their point, there's multiple combinations of a good five or your best five probably depending on the circumstances. So that's got to make you feel good as a fan. Again, we talk about like, hey man, Tim, you and I were talking before we went live here. There's some other fan bases that they got anxiety and stress, right? Like they're dealing with some feelings right now in this offseason. They don't know going into this season what the hell's going on with their team. The Bears have no idea. As much as they'll tell you they're about to win 6 Super Bowls, they have no idea what Caleb Williams is going to be. Poor Cowboys fans, man. Jerry's just down here doing whatever the heck he wants. And that ship, who knows what direction it's steering. It's all over the place. So as Packers fans, when we kind of look across the roster and we're like, well, this position, you got some competition, you got some depth. It's a lack of drama, right? And we talked about that. It's like there's a very big lack of drama right now in this team, in this offseason, and for us as fans, we can just really honestly look forward to that competition in training camp, because you can know whoever comes out of the competition going to be pretty good, going to be ready to take on the rest of the league. Whereas you don't always know that, right? It's like, well, the guy who won the competition was just sort of the lesser of two evils, right? Like sometimes you end with that. But yeah, so definitely a nice place to be right now in the off season here, just shortly removed from the draft. Chris good evening, sir. Happy to have you on. Thank you for the kind words about the show.
Thank you.
We're going to get into a few things tonight. We've talked about keeping our side of the street clean. We are going to talk about rookie minicamp a little bit. There's not a ton to take away or overreact about, but we can look at it. And we're going to get into 3 rookies we think that y'all should be tracking, or at least that we think that we should be tracking. So we're going to talk about that and a few other things. One note under keeping our side of the street clean, just a little teaser, receiver 1 does not win a Super Bowl, okay? And if you disagree with that, hang around. We're going to have a healthy debate. And then we're also going to have some thoughts on unretiring numbers. So, but to kick things off, man, we just had recently rookie minicamp kicked off. We got to see these guys for the first time with the G on their helmet, the green and gold G for some of them. Some of them already had a G on their helmet.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, what was worth overreacting to you, Tim?
Well, I try not to overreact.
You got to control yourself.
I do. No, it's cool. It's cool to see the new guys. It's cool to see the new toys that they have to play with now. Get these guys in Packer uniforms in the locker room, out on the practice field. It's all cool. But at the same time, it's literally their first couple practices as pros. Like, they're doing the basics. I think they're showing them, like, this is how we practice. These are the drills we're going to do. I don't think they're touching on the playbook much, if at all. They're just looking at these guys running around, how they can pick up what the coaches are teaching them, how much they're learning, and what they're able to not only learn, but then bring out on the practice field and retain. So I wouldn't jump to any conclusions other than, some of the things. It's cool to hear that guys like Edgerrin Cooper, Tyron Hopper, 2 linebackers, everybody was raving about how they looked physically and just, how they looked flowing throughout the drills within the team defenses that they ran. So that's cool, and there's possibilities with those guys. It's nice to hear those kind of things. But beyond that, there's not much you can take out of it. I know, one of the things that came out. No, one of the things that came out was Jordan Morgan started at left tackle. Okay, great. I totally expect that. I don't think they're going to kick him inside or move him to right tackle until further down the line, because I think they want to let him be where he's comfortable to start and get his feet wet. And it was also rookie orientation camp, so him starting at left tackle to me wasn't much news,
Right.
I think it's to be expected. So it's more so like, let's get these guys in the building. Let's see what they look like. Let's see how they can practice, really. And yeah, you can't really jump to any conclusions like, oh, Jordan Morgan's a left tackle, so he's going to be competing with Rasheed Walker at left tackle. Maybe not. Who knows? Or I think Jacob Monk was getting snaps at center. Maybe he'll be a center, maybe he'll guard. We don't know. That's just where they're starting him for 2 days of practice. So it's cool. It's exciting. We haven't seen the Packers on the field since January. So, it's something. It's news. It's a quiet time now that the draft's over. So people are going to get really excited about it. And it is exciting, but just settle down. This is just the start of the off-season work for these guys on the field and the first practices for the rookies. So I really don't think there's much that can come out of it.
No.
Other than just getting those guys acclimated to the team.
Yeah. No, and I agree, man. The one thing that I put down about takeaways or maybe overreactions to this is look at things that will translate, which there are very few. You know, they are. It's fundamentals. Halfley talked a little bit about what their install process is, which I thought that was a pretty fascinating question from one of the reporters. And it sounded like Halfley wished he had the time to sit there and answer it, but in fairness, it would take a while to talk about that. But where they are right now, it's like, yeah, let's get the fundamentals under their belt. Let's get them back in doing familiar things, get sort of loosened up, and then you slowly introduce the concepts, right? And you start with the most basic of concepts, and then you bridge off into different directions. With a little bit more specific things for strategizing and game planning. But so there's just not a ton to take, but I think that I agree as far as how do these guys look, and we've heard in the past, I don't think it's as common anymore, but in the past, guys will show up out of shape, and stuff like that. These guys don't even have time to show up out of shape. They're just freshly off the draft process. Yeah. I think it's good to hear that they look good. It's good to hear that they're eager. It's good to hear that they're sharp. And that's about all you can take from it. And the other thing is, win against air. That was one thing that it always made sense to me. It's like, listen, if you can't do your job against nobody, you can't do your job against somebody, and so in these areas, you want to see minimal mistakes, right? You want to see these guys out there looking sharp, not looking lost, and just executing on what they should be able to execute on, making the catches, making the blocks, hitting the runs, explosive, all that kind of stuff. Win against air. So those are the things. They're pretty simple, pretty easy to see whether or not they're doing that. But overall, it sounded like there was a lot of positive reactions from rookie minicamp. So that was good to hear. I want to jump to a comment here from Tyler Streber. Appreciate you jumping in with us, Tyler. Did you hear Davante Adams' comments on Max Crosby's podcast about Jordan Love? Can you give your opinion on what he said? And sounded to me like he regrets leaving. Appreciate that, Tyler. Seriously, that's a good one. And I actually did. I wanted to have some comments on that because if you didn't listen to that podcast, that is some A+ football content. Like that is some bros in the locker room football content right there. It doesn't get much more real and sincere than what that was. And that the reason I say that is listening to some of the things that Davante Adams had to say was really fascinating. It was really fun. Some of it's hilarious, the way they talk to each other or about each other. But overall, did it sound like he regrets leaving? For me, actually, what it confirmed is his primary motivator for leaving Green Bay was not on the field, and you have to you have to speak about the business a certain way, right? Like you can't just say, hey, I'm flippantly making decisions that are going to impact my football career on the field by making off the field decisions. But he really wanted to be where he is because of his family. I think that's what that confirmed for me, because he did say, it's not, I don't regret what I did, but damn, is essentially what he said. And that's saying like, yeah, it's kind of cool to think of what if, but I think he knows for the off the field reasons that he did the right thing, and only he could know that, right? Because if it's family motivated, then none of us get a say in that, and so I don't know. What did you think about that, Tim? Did you get to listen to it?
Yeah, the parts about Jordan Love, yes. I don't think he necessarily regrets leaving. I think he's fine with that. Like you said, I think it was family reasons. I think it was obviously money. I think the part that maybe he is a little hesitant in, maybe having second thoughts, is he didn't know Jordan Love was going to be this good. And if if Jordan Love was showing this in practice, maybe it would have swayed him a little more to stay in Green Bay. But I think ultimately, it was a contract thing. It was a family thing. And he went there to go play with Derek Carr, who was his college quarterback. And I think where he read it wrong was he didn't know that Carr was obviously only going to be there for a year with him. He should have, it was a new coaching staff with Josh McDaniels. So it was almost like he thought Carr was going to be his guy long term, and he only had him for a year. Maybe that's more of the regret. Like he should have went somewhere where the coach-quarterback relationship was already established. and it wasn't going to get broken up as quickly as it was because, you know, he went from Carr and now he's got Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. And it's just obviously a huge step down from what he would have had in Green Bay. Yeah. So I think maybe that's where he looked back on it, been like, man, I wish I wouldn't have been so swayed by going with Carr. I would, you know, maybe could have looked at the situation with an incoming head coach, especially one with McDaniels, who had a history when he was a head coach in Denver. He got rid of Jay Cutler real quick. And wanting to do things completely his way, the New England style. And that might be the thing that he kind of looks back on and regrets. Like maybe the coach quarterback, you know, relationship there wasn't so strong and he should have read it a little better than he did.
Yeah, I'd say he definitely misread the situation, but I think he made his honest best decision at the time. And, you know, looking at that, you can't regret things like that because it's just, you know, he was handed a bag of circumstances and that's what he made a decision on. And it turned out those circumstances were a lot different than he thought. And it's just, oh, well, you know, but I think, again, it seems like to me it was a family move. And that's why he can say he doesn't regret it because, you know, he made it for family reasons. And I follow him on Instagram. His family looks pretty happy to me. Not that I'm a creep or anything, but he looks like a happy dude. He looks like he's got a good family life. You know, obviously that's not always 100%, but for what it's worth, it doesn't seem like he regrets that. But Tyler's got another banger question here. This is something else I wanted to address. I heard the Packers started out with both practices stretching for longer than they have in previous years. Hopefully this new strength and conditioning staff can keep us healthy. Listen, this is what I said when I saw this. Like, I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned because it wasn't just that they came out stretching longer. Like, that sounds pretty reasonable. Like, hey, you know, like, they used to stretch and now they're just doing a little bit more. Makes sense. Like, they've had some issues. Like, let's do that. All right. They came out and they had a 20-minute stretch period, which Rob Demovsky described as considerably longer than before. That is flabbergasting to me. Like, and I'm not a professional athlete, but, you know, like, I'm still an athlete. I still go out and run. I'll do a few 5-mile runs a week. I did one yesterday. I have a 15 to 20 minute dynamic warm up built into that. Like, I'm just a dude running. And I'm doing more than these professional athletes who have got to be out there taking their bodies to the most explosive place that they can take it. That's insane, man. The fact, like, if we sat here and we, like, all last season talked about what could be wrong, like, they got to be figuring out, what do you do? Yeah, Christian Watson's going to go down to this specialist and they're going to study these things. Holy hell, you stretch longer. Like, that just blew my mind. I know you're itching to get in. Jump in.
No. I was just going to add to that. It was not only did they stretch longer, but they were saying some of the position groups had different stretches. So, like, you might have had the receivers doing one type of stretch and the defensive lineman doing something different. Like, not everybody was coordinated doing the same thing. So, yeah. I mean, to answer Tyler's question, it's pretty cool. I mean, if it works, great. I'm glad they're doing it. If it helps, who knows? And I'm sure they're probably doing a lot of things differently in the weight room that we don't see, you know, behind
for sure
within the stadium. So there's probably a lot of differences. That's just one that, you know, is out in the open. But hey, you know, somebody has different ideas. It's a new strength and conditioning coach. It's an entire new staff, really. There's going to be changes. So, hey,
yeah,
I welcome it. Like,
oh, totally.
Going to help them? Great. We have no idea if it's going to make a difference or what it's going to do to these guys, but it's worth a shot. Like,
we do have an idea. We have an idea. We don't know for sure what the outcome will be, but we have an idea that stretching longer,
helps.
Will help. A more, I don't know, proper warm-up period will indications, you know, what's the word they use? Allegedly will help. Now, shout out to Coach Steve Brown. He is pumping out some elite athletes down there at UW Oshkosh and has been now for, God, dude, Coach Brown, you have to jump in. He follows the show. You have to jump in. I don't even know how many years it's been. It might be like more than 15 years. So he's been there for a while. And they have been putting together championship teams, not just in football, but across the sports, men and women's. That man taught me how to warm up. He taught me about prehab. He taught me about those types of things. And again, I'm not an elite athlete. I'm not here trying to speak like I'm equal to the Packers and what they're doing. But I'm like, my goodness, like if what I'm doing is more than what they're doing, that's not a good sign. That's bad news bears right there.
No.
Bad. So I'm very, very encouraged. In fact, I'm going to go back and double down on all my Christian Watson bookmarks. All you nerds that think Christian Watson is some kind of injury bug, like some kind of washed up somehow by 23, that's another thing we're going to get into. Y'all are in for it. Yeah, and true Packers fans, you'll be in for a pleasant surprise. But if you're banking on that man not being good, you are screwed. Like, sit down. Because, hey, shout out Tyler, UWO alum. Love that. Hail Titans, man. But, like, Christian Watson's issues with hamstrings, are you kidding me? 20-minute warm-up period being considerably longer? Pfft, problem solved. Now, fair enough. Mr. Watson jumped in on the topic, and he did say that there's a lot of recovery, rehab, other things that are necessary now for Christian Watson to get back to where he needs to be and have that full-strength hammy that you don't have to be worried about. Fair enough. But, man, like a 20-minute warm-up period being considerably longer, like that was one of your problems. May not have been your only problem. That was absolutely one of your problems. No doubt in my mind about it. Tyler, if you went to UWO, you probably crossed paths with Coach Brown at some point. The Silver Fox, we called him. Bionic Brown. The guy's had more things replaced on him now, and he's still just rocking it. Dude knows a lot about strength and conditioning. Brilliant man. Shout out to you, Coach Brown. Miss you and hope to see you soon. But, just do those things, right? Do those basic things. So I'm just having a little bit of a rant that's where we were coming from, because that is kind of outrageous. But where we are now, it sounds like, is a more professional place to be, which is really, really encouraging. And again, this is the guy that was on a staff that kept Christian McCaffrey healthy. That might be the hardest dude to keep healthy in the NFL, not because he's fragile, right? He's just taking a beating. Great shout out there, Tyler. Appreciate you for bringing that one up. Pablo, go Pack go, man. Appreciate you for jumping on with us. All right, so we were going to talk here about three rookies that we're tracking. So I will, actually, you know what? I will lead us off, Tim, but I've got to give you a shout out for your first choice that will kind of, just omit for entertainment purposes. But Peter Bowden, and dadgummit, I bet you're not the only one who's watching that guy. Go Club Bowden over here. We want this guy.
I mean, if you can't be excited about a long snapping competition, then I don't know what you're doing. Like,
with a Badger involved.
With a Badger.
Come on.
Like, everybody wants Badgers on the Packers. You got your Badger. He's in competition. I mean, I would expect at training camp, Rainitzky Field, there's just going to be a ton of Peter Bowden jerseys walking around, cheering that kid on in the long snapping competition. So, I mean, that's the number one thing that I think everybody's going to training camp for. We're all going to be waiting on every tweet of what the snaps look like, and the whole season rides on it. Peter Bowden.
And I'll tell you what, guys, I'm trying to get him on the podcast. Peter Bowden, if you hear this, we want you on this podcast.
All respect.
Please.
Yeah.
We like absolutely. 100% respect. Please come on this podcast. Yes. Anyway, so we are going to track three rookies. We've got a few guys we're honed in on here that they're kind of fascinating as far as how they can fit in with the team and the impact that they can have. Obviously, we're rooting for all of these guys, so we're hoping that they turn out to be impact starters and all that. But so I'll lead us off with my three that I'm honed in on. We're going to track them throughout the offseason. This isn't just like I'm going to throw this out here and we're never going to talk about these guys again. We're going to track these guys and see how they do. We're going to be their biggest fans in training camp. We're rooting for them, bringing good energy to these guys. So my first one is Hopper. I feel like Hopper got off to some less than stellar momentum, right? Like, most fans were not wild about the Hopper pick. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm the biggest fan of the Hopper pick, but I like this guy. I think that this guy could be good. I don't have a problem, sort of stepping into the projection role as far as like I think he can be good, and I'm not going to base that 100% on what he's done and limit him to that. So Hopper is one I'm fascinated by. I think it's awesome that he looks just like Devondre Campbell and he's wearing 59. He's already got the thick dreads and everything. It's very, very cool. I like that. Whoever's assigning numbers, I appreciate their, just their style. But then Bullard, I think Bullard is one that, to me, and this is not based on play style or anything scientific or objective. This is just like my fan self. Bullard feels like Nick Collins. Bullard to me feels like, like the closest thing we've had to Nick Collins since Nick Collins. And I think part of me is wishful thinking because Nick Collins might be one of my favorite all-time Packers. And I would just love to have the next coming of Nick Collins. But yeah, so Bullard is one that I can't wait to track. Rooting for him, really fascinated by how he fits in this defense and his ceiling because I think his potential is really high. And then Kalen King, he's one that I actually, when we did this fantasy rookie draft with, I gotta give these guys a shout out earlier in the offseason, NFLDraftFanatics.com. Shout out to those guys. I don't know if they're listening, but them and their crew, they did a kind of a fantasy football style draft, but with only this rookie class. So we were building an offense and a defense with just the rookie class. So I drafted Kalen King in that. I was fascinated by him then. I'm fascinated by him now. He certainly had high potential at the beginning of the draft process, and I'm not one to think that that just went away. So I would love to see another 7th round pick actually hit on this team. And those are my 3. But Tim, give me your 3.
Yeah, I like all your 3 to begin with. I think they were great, and 2 out of your 3 were definitely going to be guys I would talked about. But just to be a little different, Edgerrin Cooper for me, I can't wait to see him. I mean, he's fast. He's got 34-inch arms for a linebacker, which is pretty unique and rare. Can fly around the field, and everything you hear and read about this guy is that he attacks. And we haven't had a lot of that from our linebackers. Maybe it's the system they've played in. I'm sure that's a big part of it. But it'd be nice to have an attacking linebacker, attacks the line of scrimmage, gets ball carriers down. He can rush the passer a little bit. And is just a freak athlete. And, there's been a lot of talk. Will he be the Mike? Will Quay be the Mike? Who's going to be the Will? Who's going to be the Sam linebacker? I don't care. Just put Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker on the field and let them go. Let them use their athletic ability and not have to think so much, not have to read and react, and just go get the ball carrier and go create havoc. Kind of like what Hafley's talking about, what he wants his defensive line to do. So I can't wait to see Cooper on the field. I think he was the best linebacker in the draft class, and the athletic ability that he shows is really special. They got to harness it. They got to, make the most of what he can do, fit him into the defense. But I can't wait to see him running around, going sideline to sideline in the defense. Because I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he could be one of the best. I don't want to get ahead of it, but I think he's got the physical ability to be one of the top linebackers in the league. He's just that good from an athletic standpoint. Another guy, Evan Williams, and I don't know Evan Williams that well. He's not one of the guys that you and I talked about much leading up to the draft. But they traded up to get him in the 4th round, so he's obviously a guy they think very highly of. And I know some people were questioning that, thinking that he was a guy that was going to go later on in the draft. Whatever, that doesn't matter now. But it seems like they see the versatility in him that they see in Bullard, the ability to play the slot, the ability to play deep, come down in the box. I'm interested to see what they got in him. There's been people saying that he was the best player in the Oregon defense. He had 4 good years at Fresno State before he transferred to Oregon. So he was a productive player. I don't know a ton about him, but I want to see what they have in him because there's some versatility there where if he's good with Bullard, with Xavier McKinney, you're going to be able to see some unique packages, whether it's 3 safeties, interchangeable, where they're going to line these guys up. Maybe you put Bullard in the slot, maybe even put Williams there at times, McKinney. They're going to be able to do a lot of different things with their defense, and I think Williams can help unlock some of that potentially. So very interested to see what he looks like and where he fits in the overall scheme. And then the other one is Jacob Monk, the offensive lineman they took in the 5th round out of Duke, who we all talk about Graham Barton. Well, they took Graham Barton's teammate instead, and he just kind of feels like that Packers pick, that 3rd-day Packers pick who's under the radar, what kind of like Corey Linsley was, and even like Zach Tom was.
Yeah, Zach Tom is what made me think of.
Yeah, he's got the versatility. I mean, he's not going to play tackle, most likely. He's going to be a guard or a center. Not the biggest guy, but he's got some athletic ability where he can move, and he just seems like he plays his angles well. He seems like he's a pretty good technician in there. And maybe it doesn't work for him, and he's not not here for very long. But I almost feel like he's a guy that you're going to see playing in Green Bay into a second contract, whether he's always a starter or whether he's like the versatile 6th offensive lineman who will come in and play some center, play some guard, start at times. Other times he's just a super sub, almost like a Lucas Patrick, but better, hopefully. Not that Lucas Patrick was bad, but you want obviously more than that. And I think he's got the capability to be more than what Lucas Patrick was, but almost that like guy who, if he's starting, he's pretty solid. And if he's a sub, you really have somebody there with a ton of versatility who can play multiple positions. And if there's injuries, he can fill in and you don't worry about a drop off in the play. But just I'm interested to see, because I don't know if he makes a contribution in 2024, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but he could be, on that active, every week, the next guy up at center or guard, depending on what, if there's an injury or not, he's the next one up.
I don't know, man. I'm looking at Monk like he might be in that best 5.
I could see it too, but again, let's see what they look like in camp with the veterans there. And
of course.
I definitely think it's possible he at least competes at right guard.
Yeah,
and possibly center, either one. But I would think right guard maybe more likely in 2024. Whereas down the line, maybe center's his best position, and they feel comfortable enough with him that they don't, that they let Josh Myers go. But yeah, he's going to fly under the radar, I think, for a lot of Packers fans, because he's an interior offensive lineman who they took in the 5th round. And he's, you're not going to see him catching passes or rushing the passer or making tackles. But I really like the fit. And I don't know, there's something that tells me he's going to stick for a while in Green Bay.
Well, yeah, and that's why these are our guys that we want to track, right? It's like there's just something about these guys. Feels like they could be difference makers here. They could stick. They could really have a fun journey to track. So we're going to track them. But there's, the day 3 offensive linemen, it's almost like 2nd-round receivers with the Packers. There's just something about that sweet spot that they seem to hit. And it's not necessarily 100%, but it's a high percentage. It's higher, I think, than normal. We might have to dig into the numbers since we'll have some off-season time to do that. But yeah, I love it, man. I love those 3. So just to review, in case you might have missed either of them. So my 3 rookies that I'm tracking throughout the offseason, through training camp, rooting for them, hoping that they become impact starters: Hopper, Bullard, King. And then Tim is going with Cooper, Evan Williams, and Monk. And of course, we're both on the Peter Bowden train. So again,
Absolutely.
Peter Bowden, sir, if you are listening, we would love to hear from you. First of all, I am very curious about what goes into a position battle for a long snapper. And that's not even that's a serious question. I want to know, how do you try to beat that person out? Is there some snapping mechanics? I don't know. We got to know. So if somebody can hook us up with Peter Bowden, get him on here, because we've got some curiosities about the long snapping competition, but we also are rooting for him to win it. So anyway, yeah. So then the other thing we were going to get into tonight, and y'all might have fun with this in the comments. Clint Stoner, welcome. Good evening, sir. Can't remember the last Badger that was on the Packers. Oh, man. Vince Beagle?
Cole Van Lannon, briefly.
Was it? Wait, which one did you say, Tim?
Cole Van Lannon.
Ah,
Right?
yeah, that's right. He was
him.
after Beagle.
And
That's right.
they had wasn't Ricky Wagner a Badger? They had him
He
for a
was.
year.
He was. Oh, that's right. They
The
did.
Lions,
That's
yeah.
right. Because he was with the
Those were
Lions for the
terrible
most
years.
of his career.
And Beagle was
Yeah.
another one, and
I think
Jared
that was-
Abadaris.
No, he was before Van Lannon and Beagle, I think.
Yeah. But I think Van Lannon and Beagle and Wagner.
Yeah, it hasn't been a lot. The
No.
last real, I guess, significant contributor was probably Mark Tauscher, another day 3 offensive lineman. Which back then I guess was day 2.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they had it. I think it might have been just one day back then. I can't. We'll have to go look back there. But anyway, there we go. Those were our previous Badgers on the Packers. But yeah, so we're moving in to keep our side of the street clean. So we're going to clean up our side of the street. Every now and then we got to throw in this segment because as Packer fans, we just get a little bit out of bounds. Like we go too far on some things. And I think we need help kind of reining it in. Like, hey, let's clean this up a little bit. Let's not go that far. So for example, just to kind of paint the picture of what we're trying to do, if we were Bears fans, we would be telling each other to stop predicting Super Bowls. Have we not learned our lesson yet? Stop predicting Super Bowls. Let's just let that play out. But we're not Bears fans. We can predict Super Bowls. That's totally fair game right now. You want to go off predict Super Bowls, you get after it. One thing, though, that I am just really getting fed up with this offseason already is the idea that people are writing off guys after 2 years in the league. And it's just like, man, 2 years in the league is not a long time, especially for a higher draft pick. If you're talking about an undrafted guy, 2 years in the league, that's different. You're probably defying the odds at that point. But guys like Watson or Quay Walker, like, y'all, you can't think that you know everything that there is to know about these guys. They're 23 years old. Like, my goodness. Let's think about how mature we all were at 23 years old. I was at the very beginning of my professional career, I'll say that, and certainly not even close to what I would call mature. So, like, there's just so much still to be developed about these guys that it's foolish to try to write them off right now. One, you don't have to, right? Like anybody who's looking for a reason to boot players like Watson and Walker, it's why? What's your reason? What do you need to get rid of these guys for?
I think of how much they've gone through and like the changes that they're going through on, within the team. Like, so Walker was in a defense that wasn't very good and probably didn't fit his skill set. Now he's got a new defense that hopefully will take advantage of what he can do. So we should get a really good read on him in year 3. Maybe the first 2 years is what he is. Could be, but I think it's going to be a difference, with Jeff Hafley's system. And then with Watson, he's had the injuries, but he also had to come in and, he had a veteran established quarterback who he had to learn hand signals from, of course.
Can't forget the hand signals.
He's not very welcoming the young guys, though apparently now he is with the Jets, I guess. But he sure as hell wasn't in Green Bay, especially the latter part of his career. But he had that, and then he had to transition to learning a new quarterback in Jordan Love, and the offense changed a lot. And he had Randall Cobb in the room with him, and then all of a sudden Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard are gone, and he's the veteran in the room. So like that's some pretty big changes for Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs, who was second-year guy too. So it's 2 years, but those guys have been through a lot now. And I think at least offensively, there's going to be some stability now going into the second year, whereas the defense, it's a new defense. Everything's changed, hopefully for the better. But you're right, like too soon with writing some of these guys off yet.
Too soon. So and there's just no reason. It's not like, well, it's time to make a decision on that contract, so let's all have an opinion about it. No. These guys are both under contract for at least 2 more seasons. And there's a fifth-year option. Oh, I don't know. Do second-round picks have a fifth-year option?
No, it's just a first
so
round.
Quay has a fifth-year option.
Quay and Wyatt. Devontae Wyatt's another one.
Right. And not as many people are ready to write him off, not that I've heard as Quay Walker and Christian Watson. I've heard many people now that are just ready to get rid of those two, and I'm just like,
it just doesn't make sense. Like they're so young, they're under contract, they're full of potential still. Like it's not like, well, we know what these guys are, so let's just chalk them up. Like you just don't, And if anything, Christian Watson's a touchdown machine. Like since in the last 2 seasons from his class, like he and Romeo Doubs are leading in touchdowns of all those guys. So like let's slow down on like the having an opinion about 3 or 4 years down the road team building. You just don't need to do that yet. You're going to learn so much about these players while they remain under contract that by the time their contract is out, it'll be clear what needs to be done, right? Or before their contract is out, they'll get an extension. But it's just one of those things. Like there's enough to talk about. We don't need to pretend like there's not enough to talk about, that we got to start getting rid of players like Christian Watson and Quay Walker. Like it just doesn't make sense. Keep your side of the street clean. Like those kinds of opinions are just weird, guys. Like it's just, there's no point, no benefit, nothing to be gained from it. If you're not sure about those guys, fine. You don't have to think they're going to be great. You can think maybe, I don't know if they're going to be good, but you still have to watch them play over the next 2 seasons. So you might as well leave room for the idea that they could be good, because if you're a Packers fan, you want them to be good, right? I mean, only good things come from that. So I had to do that. I had to get that out there because I'm seeing that all over the place, and it just grinds my gears. Because remind yourself, guys, that some of these rookies who just got drafted are actually the same age as Christian Watson and Quay Walker. Just keep that in mind.
Crazy.
Some of them might be even older. But yeah, it's absolutely wild. And then the other thing, this isn't really a keep our side of the street clean thing. This is just more of like kind of a common conversation that has gone on now for years and years. And it definitely made its way through Packers Twitter and the Packers conversation. I don't know that it's as heavy right now, although there are some folks that are pretty involved in it. But it's this idea about the receiver one and this like mystical ability that receiver one has to win Super Bowls, even though when I started looking for the last time receiver one was responsible for winning Super Bowls, I had to go back quite a ways to the greatest receiver one ever in Jerry Rice. And even then, I don't know, Joe Montana was pretty dang good. So I don't know. I get really kind of over this conversation too, but well, the Packers don't even have receiver one. It's like, okay, where's your evidence that they need that? Like, where's the team that's like, hey, with receiver one, this team was unbeatable? No, all the big bad receiver ones, most of them don't have a ring. Randy Moss doesn't have a ring. T.O. doesn't have a ring. Like, we can keep going down the list. It's actually pretty impressive how many of them don't have rings. Chris Carter doesn't have a ring. Tim Brown doesn't have a ring. And even now, like the guys that are unequivocally some of the best in the league, Justin Jefferson, no ring. Jamar Chase, no ring. And yes, there's a long list of reasons why those two wouldn't have a ring yet, and I get it. We don't need to get into that. We're not Bengals fans or Vikings fans. The point being, if receiver one was this like ticket to winning a Super Bowl, it would have happened. Y'all, like we had receiver one for a few years with QB one, right? Like you had the best QB in the league with the best receiver in the league for more than 1 year. And the supporting cast wasn't terrible. They weren't great. But the point being is if that was the recipe, it would have worked. It doesn't. And part of this comes from this conversation about T. Higgins. A lot of people keep asking, well, what if the Packers would have drafted T. Higgins back, instead of Jordan Love? And it's just like, good Lord. Where's the evidence that T. Higgins is going to go win Super Bowls for the Packers? There's evidence that top 10 defenses win Super Bowls. There's evidence that top 5 running games win Super Bowls. There's evidence that smart quarterbacks win Super Bowls. But where's the evidence that receiver one wins Super Bowls or the best receiver room in the league wins Super Bowls? Like the one exception that you guys can give me recently, and I'll counter you all day with the quarterback, is Tyreek Hill. You can say, well, Tyreek Hill won one with didn't they? Yeah, the Chiefs won one before Tyreek left.
Yeah.
So you can say that, but Pat Mahomes also won back-to-back Super Bowls without him. So that kind of got blown up there. And who was his receiver two in those? MVS. He wasn't a good enough receiver two when he was with the best quarterback in the league, with the best receiver in the league opposite of him. Like that's like the whole argument about receivers. And by the way, I am biased because I love the receiver position because I played it. It's just so overblown. And it's just weird to me that we've got all this data now that shows pretty consistently that a strong running game and a top defense are a pretty good recipe to win in a Super Bowl, And so I don't know. What are your thoughts about this, Tim?
I'd rather just have a great quarterback than a great receiver one. Like, that's what it comes down to. And Mahomes, they had a really good defense last season. I don't think the running game was anything special. But you're right, he didn't have a wide receiver one. He had Kelsey. They struggled all year, but they knew how to win in the playoffs because they had been there and they played complementary football. So play complementary football, but it's great to have receiver one. We had Devontae Adams, who was awesome. He's a Packer Hall of Famer. He's maybe a Pro Football Hall of Famer. It was great, but we didn't win anything with him. Now, was that on him? No.
No. He played as well as you could play.
Right, exactly. And there were times where they force-fed the ball to him when they really shouldn't have, when there were other receivers and other options to go to. But they had to, because of their style, because of what their quarterback wanted to do, everything was funneled to Devontae Adams, right or wrong. They didn't win with him. It's great to have, a top receiver, one of the best guys in the league, sure, but give me the great quarterback. And I think there's different ways you can win. And you mentioned defense and a running game, and that's awesome. And I think offensively, though, you can spread it around. You can have multiple weapons so that the teams you're going up against don't know how you're going to attack them week to week or even within a game, where you can make an adjustment and say, okay, this guy's not getting open. Let's feature somebody else. We can't get the ball deep to Christian Watson. We have Jaden Reed in the slot, or we have Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft at tight end. Like, let's have that multi-dimensional offense that can beat you through several different players instead of only being able to beat you through one different player. But to me, it comes down to it's how good your quarterback is, and that can raise everything else. Like we're seeing Mahomes do. We've seen, Joe Burrow when they went on their run to the Super Bowl that they lost. And yeah, Jamar Chase is excellent, but Burrow raises their play and raises that team. So it comes, it comes down to quarterback. The receiver one debate, it gets old because we can go out there and there's a ton of good receivers, and I'm not knocking them. It'd be, hell, if we had Justin Jefferson, that would be awesome. But
yeah,
we're still had Devontae Adams. But you can win different ways, and one of them is get the ball to all of your weapons, be a multi-dimensional offense, and play complementary football. And you have to be able to do more than just score a ton of points. You better be able to play some defense, where you have to do more than just you can't just rely on a number one receiver to do everything for you. You have to be a complete team with a very good quarterback to win. And that's the way, if you have a mediocre or just a decent quarterback with a one number one receiver, I don't think you're set up for long-term success. I'd much rather have a great quarterback who maybe doesn't have a number one, top 10 receiver, but has several different guys who are complementary to each other and can do different things within that offense. Because with that great quarterback, it just unlocks everything and it keeps you in contention for years to come.
Totally agree. Yeah, and that's the thing. Is look back on history, and Tyler jumping back in here. Cooper Kupp, though, he dominated that year that the Rams won. It's not a bad argument, but look around, right? One of the best coaches, one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best defenses. It's you can't say that, man, if they didn't have Cooper Kupp, I don't know. I'm thinking that team without Cooper Kupp found someone else. You know what I mean? It's not that Cooper Kupp was just a wildly dominant receiver, like a DK Metcalf, Megatron level athlete kind of guy. He was just really good in the system he was in. I'm not taking away from him. He's been good. He wasn't like a fluke or anything like that. It's just that you can't credit him for being the reason they won that, right? You're not taking Cooper Kupp, dropping him in another team, and all of a sudden he's elevating that team to Super Bowl status. How he fit within that team definitely elevated what they did. no doubt about that. But that's where it's like, I'm not seeing the guy where it's like you take him, you put him in here, you've got a better chance to win the Super Bowl. Like obviously Tom Brady did that. You can see how the quarterback position does that when you take Peyton Manning from the Colts to the Broncos, when you take Matt Stafford from the Lions to the Rams, like quarterback translates, right? Like you can take that position, plug it into another team, and that team has a better chance to win the Super Bowl. I just don't see it that way with receiver one. In fact, Devontae Adams is a good example. When he went over to the Raiders, he was still playing high-level receiver one football, and they weren't good.
No.
So that's where just the argument for me, it blows my mind how much it gets overplayed because of how much data we have against it. So I don't know.
And Cooper Kupp is excellent, and that's a good example, but that team got better and won the Super Bowl because they got a better quarterback. That Stafford was the difference, and that's what elevated them.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of pieces to that Rams Super Bowl. Shoot, one of the best defensive players of all time, maybe Aaron Donald. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So it's.
I'll always say they would have had to come up to Lambeau and play the championship game if the 49ers wouldn't have beaten the Packers. So instead they got it in their own stadium in a nice dome.
You just had to put a little salt
not trying
in that wound right there. Oh,
they might not have been Super Bowl champion. That could have been the Packers' year.
Could have been.
They could have got through the Niners.
Could have been. What could have been? Oh well. Here we are. We're getting better.
Sorry.
We're not gonna end on negative vibes here, Tim. Goodness gracious, man.
Sorry to bring us down.
Whew. But thank you to Tyler for jumping in. That's an excellent point. It's not a bad point about Cooper Kupp. I'd still argue against it. But so then another topic that was a little bit popular this week that was flying around and I thought was worth talking about. And, this is one that I don't know. Everybody's going to have their own opinion on this. So definitely jump in the comments and let us know what you think. But unretiring numbers. Tim, yay or nay?
Big nay.
Big nay.
You're retiring a number for a reason. Don't ever unretire it. If you're unretiring it, then why did you ever retire it to begin with? And thank God the Packers have never done this, but we've seen it. I've seen it in other sports, and the Broncos did it when Peyton Manning went there.
Wasn't Terrell Davis's 30? Wasn't that retired, and they unretired it for Philip Lindsay?
Maybe. I don't know if Davis's was. You might be right about that. But I know Peyton Manning's number was retired, and he needed that number. For what reason, I don't know. And credit to our former quarterback. He went to the Jets, and he took a different number.
Yeah.
To me, no, you don't unretire numbers. I guess this is coming up because jersey numbers were assigned to the rookies and all that. And no, if you're retiring a number, you retired it for a reason. And it shouldn't be unretired. Respect the past. I know, Tony Canadea's numbers retired. He played long before any of us were around to see him play. But he was a great Packer, and they retired his number, and it should never be unretired. And, I think we can maybe talk about Paul Hornung's number 5 isn't retired officially, but it's unofficial. To me, if nobody's going to wear that in a game, then just retire it officially, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's kind of like that gray area. So that's the one I maybe, could see either side on. But, the numbers that they've retired, nobody should ever wear them again. Nobody's ever going to wear 12 again. And you just leave it like that. Players, there's a lot of numbers. I think the problem is there's now 90-man rosters in the offseason, so you start running out of numbers. But even more reason to be selective. And I think the Packers – with the great history that they've had, there could be a lot of numbers retired, right? But they've had to really be selective because you have such large rosters in football. You start retiring all these guys' numbers, you're going to run out of new numbers to give the players.
Yeah.
And I'm a hockey fan. You can see some of the teams that retire numbers in hockey, they hardly have any numbers left because they got so many guys up there. You can't do that when you have a 90-man roster. So
hockey rosters are considerably smaller, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But some of these teams are, they got 12 guys retired, and you're like, what are you doing? But no, I would never unretire a number. No. If they're retired for a reason, for a great player, and leave it retired.
Yeah, I agree. I get where it's coming from. It's sort of a projection of, well, eventually, you run out of numbers, so you got to have the ability to unretire them at some point, right? And I lean hard away from that. I'd say, like, no, you don't unretire numbers. And at the point in the future where it becomes necessary to have the conversation, I got to thinking about this, like, excuse me, how would you do it, right? Like, do you just unretire a number and throw it up for grabs? What I was thinking is, like, how about this? If there is going to be a number unretired, there should be like a process for it. You should have like a committee, made up of like team executives, team historian, maybe team Hall of Famers. Like, have a legit committee of people who are appreciative and familiar with the team's history to say whether or not that number can be unretired. And when you unretire it for that one player, that's it. It goes retired again when that player's done with it. So you'd have to like constantly have that reapproval. I think that's the most respectful way to do it if you ever get to a point where it's just a necessity, which, gosh, you got to be talking about like decades into the future.
Right. Or at some point, you just stop retiring numbers and just say, you know what, we're not, like, all these teams, we have the Packer Hall of Fame. They put the names up on the facade. Like, all these teams have a ring of honor. Like, at some point, you just say, you know what, we've retired too many. We're going to stop that. Your name's going up on the ring of honor. Like, maybe you do that. Now, luckily for the Packers, I don't think they're anywhere close where they have to like make a decision. Like, are we going to keep retiring numbers? Because they've been pretty selective. 12 is going to be retired, but after that, and it might be a really long time until another one's even in consideration.
Yeah, you have to be like all-time greatness. You really do. Yes. To have even to think about having your number retired, and Tyler here says, don't unretire them. Actually, I think lately just across sports, we're retiring jersey numbers too easy nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah, and that goes along with what Tim was saying about hockey. And, I think it does need to be a thing where it's like, there will never be another player like this on a team. Like Chicago, the Bulls will never have another MJ. Like, you can safely say that,
Right.
The Packers will never have someone. Well, hang on a second. You likely won't have someone like Aaron Rodgers. You might have somebody better than Aaron Rodgers. All right. I'll stop. But no, but the point being, like, the guys that we know are retired. Reggie White. You'll never have another Reggie White, man. Reggie White was special beyond his play. Like, what he represents to the franchise is something that goes into why his number was retired. He obviously passed away way too soon. And I think that's where he got the expediency of having the number retired. But, like, the player, he brings a championship back to Green Bay. He's part of that 96 team. Like, he's, one of the first free agents, right, to ever come to Green Bay. There's just a lot around Reggie White that is legendary, and obviously just a legendary defensive player, one of the greatest pass rushers of all time. So it's not like he didn't do it on the field, but just these players, man, like their numbers are retired for a reason. Even the older guys, Canadio and Hudson, like some of these guys that you really have to get into the history books to know what they did and what they meant to the game. That's why, one of my comments was, like, if you want to unretire a number, like, you should have to go learn why that number was retired. It wasn't just flippantly like, well, this guy was pretty good, so we'll just like check this one away. No, like, these were legendary people. Bottom line, we're not unretiring numbers, not on this show at least. We got Clint agreeing with us here. Clint Stoner, always appreciate your contribution, sir. Agree, do not unretire numbers. We're not doing it. So if you guys are pro unretiring numbers, you'll have to let us know why. Comment section is available to you, but we don't agree. So take that. Oh, man. So plenty of things still to cover this offseason, but relatively uneventful last week. Since the draft, you get the rookie minicamp. We talked about that. We got a little bit of a press conference today. We talked about that. Is there anything else that we got to solve here tonight, Tim?
No, but I mean, we can look ahead. We got some of the mini camp practices will be open to the media coming
Absolutely.
up for the next few weeks, so that'll be cool. And then as we get into June, they have I should say, some of the OTA practices, and then it switches to the mini camp practice, whatever you want to call them. But at least that's something to look forward to. And then who knows? Any day now, we could be getting a Jordan Love contract extension too.
Yes, we're on Jordan Love contract extension watch. I don't know if that necessitates an emergency pod to react to, but we'll certainly have reactions once that happens. That's got to be like a certainty, right? Like that's definitely happening.
Yeah, I would be shocked if that doesn't happen. I mean, maybe it takes until training camp or even into training camp. It's a negotiation. They take a while, but yeah, I would be shocked if he doesn't get a contract before the start of the season.
It's just it's a no-brainer. It's like the sooner you do it, the more money you save at this point, right? Like you can't just sit here and think like, well. But and Tyler brings up a good point. Kenny Clark contract. That's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
That one, I think I'm hopeful, but I'm also not looking forward to them not bringing him back because it just seems like a Packer thing.
Yes, it does.
So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But he's here this season, so we know that. So we're not worried about that. Doesn't seem like a guy that's going to hold out.
No, I wouldn't think so. I would love an extension. That would be great to be able to talk about that and see that news. But let's be optimistic, I guess. But that one's not one I'm expecting anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, and I guess my optimistic take, if we're going to have an optimistic perspective on why they will bring him back in a third contract, which they very rarely do, he's still not 30. The guy is still not like on the way out. He's 29, I believe.
If that, I think he's still 20. I mean, maybe he's going to be 20.
Maybe
whatever.
he's even younger than
28, 29. Yeah.
28, 29. Yeah, so he's not an old guy.
No.
So yeah, I mean, and defensive linemen play in their 30s. It's not like there's a really dramatic drop off that you have to be worried about with a guy like Kenny Clark, especially with the talent that is around him now. He doesn't have to be a one-man show. So yeah, that one is an interesting one to point out there, Tyler. And then quick shout out to Rev Trev. Appreciate you, sir. Not a lot to talk about, which we were really enjoying, by the way. Like, this is great compared to previous off seasons and the drama that we had to go through. So, kick your feet up, Packers fans. Enjoy the quiet time. It might be kind of boring, but appreciate you there, Rev Trev. Well done finding something to chat about. We will every week. We'll be here. We'll find something to chat about. You guys aren't going to be bored. We're going to have a good time. There's always stuff flying around worth talking about for sure. Yeah. But yeah, we've got some newsworthy things that are lingering out there that might pop up here sooner than later. And then, it's just we got to get across that off-season bridge, and make our way to training camp. It's going to be tough. There's going to be some low points that we're going to have to get through. We'll do it together, and training camp will be here before we know it, guys. That's just hold strong in there. Take in every piece of content you can.
Yeah.
Hey, but seriously, the Max Crosby podcast with Devontae Adams, every minute of it is worth it. Excellent content right there. So highly recommend that. But all right, but thank y'all for hanging out with us this week on the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. Y'all check us out on YouTube, Twix, we're calling it. Remember, we're sticking with that. Twix, Facebook, Instagram. Spike that like button for us. If you enjoyed the episode, and please subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel here. And we will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go, Pack!